Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. Amen. A friend of mine, Elizabeth Jameson, formerly a priest in this diocese, writes a Substack blog called Broken Open. And last week, amidst the many events in Minneapolis and across the United States, Elizabeth began her post by saying, "The crack in the cosmic egg broke wide open this week." She then quotes a line from the poet W.B. Yeats, who in his poem, The Second Coming, says, "Things fall apart, and the center cannot hold." Elizabeth goes on to speak about what becomes very clear, and that there are two ways of being. One that she calls the old way, which she says is a tightening, a grasping for control, a spinning of narratives to preserve power, doubling down on fear and domination. It is loud, reactive, and desperate to maintain the illusion that things are still under control. Elizabeth contrasts this with another way, one that she describes as quieter, but unmistakable. She says this other way is the way of presence, truth-telling, courage, and collective care. And it does not deny what is happening, nor does it collapse into despair. It stays, it witnesses, it acts from integrity. This week, as I watched the news of the death of Renee Good, followed quickly by the death of Alex Preddy, and the protests in Minneapolis, you may or may not know that I serve as the missioner or staff officer for Asian ministry for our wider Episcopal Church. And on conversations with some of the clergy in Minneapolis, I've found that our Hmong and Karen Episcopalians who have been living under the threat of ICE are in hiding. These same people that were refugees for 10 and 20 years living in tents. And many in the community are grieving all these losses, and they have responded by protecting their neighbors through actions of resistance and protest. The actions of ICE and those who have charge of them are a clear demonstration of what Elizabeth describes as the old way, grasping for control with violence, spinning narratives, and the incitement of fear and domination. And what she describes as quieter are the actions of the community through presence, truth-telling, courage, and collective care. The actions of ICE and those who order these actions are not of God. I say this in a way that is direct and clear because I believe there is no other way at this point to describe ICE and the community of Minneapolis. Paul, in his letter to the Colossians, says, "For the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but it is the power of God to us who are being saved." Paul is giving us two very distinct ways of being: foolishness versus wisdom, salvation versus perishing. And further, there is no way to say that someone is creating violence and is accomplishing nonviolence at the same time. Either the work builds community or it tears it down. The cross of Jesus does not teach a grasping for control, spinning of stories to preserve power, nor does it inspire actions that create fear for purposes of domination. Not on the part of Jesus, anyhow. It is simply not what Jesus teaches. If someone is teaching those things, it is not Jesus. And sometimes it can be hard to see because something just looks shiny and new. Power that is dressed up in lies can be so attractive. And when we have endured hardship, one thing after another, it is so easy to put our trust in someone who promises revenge against someone different from us in some way. But that is not the message of the cross. The message of the cross is, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. It is, blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. And blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Our salvation comes from living into this message of the cross. When God transforms our hearts and minds into blessed are the merciful, blessed are the peacemakers, we build on earth the kingdom of heaven. And yes, there may be persecution involved. There are dangerous situations we can find ourselves in, especially if we participate in protests or other actions that run counter to the powers that are part of this old way of doing things. It is unbelievable how people grasp and hold on to this old way. And it doesn't matter what political party or religious authority or social construct you are affiliated in or affiliated with. And that is why Jesus was crucified. The other way, the way, capital W, is the way of presence, truth-telling, courage, and collective care. And I say capital W for way because the early followers of Jesus were not called Christians. They were followers of the way, as Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And the way teaches presence. Jesus is God with us. Being truly present with one another in today's context may be to witness the injustice being done in our name. To be present to one another allows us to tell the truth about what we see. And our witness counteracts the lies being told to us, whether it is about some situation we have seen or experienced, what is reasonable or not, or even some verifiable scientific evidence. We can and we must speak truth to power. The second letter of Paul to Timothy, chapter 1, verse 7, says that God did not give us a spirit of fear, but one of power and love and discipline. Collective care, then, is how we are sent out into the world, like those restaurants in Minneapolis that warmed up protesters with soup, or how churches deliver food and other supplies to people who are hiding. And while we do what we are called to do, wherever God leads us, there are some who will call us foolish. There are some who will disagree mightily and violently, but we will take heart and trust in God. Amen.